One more thing before we move into the planning guide. I don't know if you've heard that Bishop Sistone has written a pastoral letter called A Future Full of Hope that will be mailed to each of you the second week in December, so another week, 10 days. He felt, having lived among you for a couple of years, that he ought to, in honesty, share with you some of his perspectives. He said today to the diocesan staff, it's like through his trifocals, what he's seen. And he's going to invite people just to reflect on that and to share some of your own thoughts. So just as a coming attraction, in your mailbox, coming soon, is A Future Full of Hope by the bishop. It's about 50 pages long, so he expects you might read a couple pages at a time and take a little time with it. But what he's really wanting to do is to gather his thoughts to you and then gather back and hear from your thoughts. So know that's coming. And the second thing the bishop asked me to say beyond this is that he is so committed to this process that not only has he invested a lot of time and effort for himself and written a pastoral letter for you to think about in terms of the present and the future, but he's committed beginning in January to go to each of the areas of the diocese 1 month at a time and spend an hour in prayer, so a holy hour in each of the different regions. So at some point that'll be up around here at one of the parishes, and that'll be all the way through 2012, January to December. One last thing, I was with him in September at a meeting of the priests and the pastoral administrators. And this is only the second time I was ever with him, but I was really struck by a number of things he said. One is that he did intend to share his experience. Two is that prayer for him, not just by him, but by the whole church in the Diocese of Saginaw is really important in the next year as this process unfolds. But three, he said something like this: I'm an Italian, he said. I cry a lot. And he said, I expect to cry a lot in this process because I know we are talking about each and every special parish in the diocese. And there may be changes in the structure of parishes. And so he said, I don't take this lightly. I don't expect the people who will be working in this process to take this lightly at all. It's very important that we honor each of our parishes, even as we think about what's the best configuration to do the work of this church moving into the future. And I was just struck by not the head experience, which might be 50 pages of words, but the heart experience as well of saying, this is sacred work. So again, I want to say thank you very much for your presence here and for your commitment to do some of this important work. So let's just take a step forward. If you join me in the first tab, which is called Introduction Materials, page 1. So tab 1, page 1 for a moment. And what you'll find there is a list of goals. Now, these can just be words on a page for you, but I want to suggest to you as core team members, you're going to be asked more than once a question, something like, why are we doing this? Why can't we just be the way we've been in the past? And these goals are an articulation of why this project is happening right now. So if you look at those goals or look up on the screen, to enhance the vibrancy of parish life. Goal number 1. Number 2, to strengthen the presence and the ministry of the church in the urban and rural areas of the diocese. Number 3, to foster an appreciation for and participation in Sunday Eucharist. Now, if we just stop there, those are pretty significant goals. To help every parish be alive and vibrant in faith. To strengthen the presence and the ministry of the church. To have Sunday Eucharist be even more meaningful for Catholics throughout the diocese. But there's more. To promote new evangelization efforts throughout the diocese. To realign parishes considering the number of priests available to serve, considering financial resources, considering changing demographics. Later, I'm going to show you a couple of the demographic realities in the diocese. Among other things, they'll talk about from 740,000 to 710,000 people in this diocese. Catholics from 139,000 or so to 108,000. Priests from 100 and some, this was in 2004, to 55 active diocesan priests. 32 retired diocesan priests. Another about 10 or 12 either religious order priests or priests from other dioceses. So some of those realities of priest realities, but geography, the geography of this diocese, all really significant in goal number 5. Number 6, to ensure that all parishioners have opportunities for quality, lifelong Catholic education and formation, whether that's in schools, parish faith formation, adult faith formation, and so on. Number 7, to strengthen service to those who are marginalized. That's again a number of significant things. New evangelization, the realigning of parishes, lifelong Christian education and formation, and service to those on the margins. In addition, this project intends to invite people to look at promoting vocations to ordained, vowed, and lay ministry, to support new initiatives for youth and young adults, to build a greater sense of unity among Catholics from all the cultures in the diocese. And finally, to increase collaboration among all the entities in the local, national, and universal church, that people are working together, that no one is an island unto themselves doing their own thing, but that there's a sharing of resources, or as a priest said last night in Saginaw, that we be much better stewards of the resources God has given us, that we stop duplicating resources, really try to say, how can we be the most alive church we can be? And if that's all not enough, to advocate for peace and justice in the church and in the world. Now that itself, just stopping with those 12 goals, could be an evening of reflection. So I invite you on your time to look at those goals. And when you're doing the work I'm going to be inviting you into tonight, I encourage you to go back to these goals. And when you say, this is the future we think makes sense for us in terms of this part of the diocese, you need to ask yourself, are they going to help these goals to be achieved? So I really promise you right up front, these goals are not mere words on a page. They are a criteria by which every parish's best thinking is going to be evaluated. Let me step forward just within our time, and I'm going to ask you to go to the second page in that section, and then we're going to skip around to another section. But I want you to know a little bit more of the players in this process. So Bishop Sistone is the person who initiated the process. Eventually I'll describe to you the 8 steps in this process. But he has then delegated people to work with him. So on page 2, you see there the role of a diocesan planning commission. And that planning commission is made up of about 20 people. I actually met them for the first time Monday night. I have their names here. You're welcome to come on up and look at them. There's about half priests and half lay people from each of the areas of the diocese, of the Thumb region, the Western region, the Central region. These are men and women who have responded to the call. We asked the other night, why did you say yes to be on the planning commission? And beyond some of them saying their arm was twisted by Sister Mary Judith and so on, I was struck as an outsider to the diocese by the number of lay people, women and men, and priests who said, because I'm here to serve the Diocese of Saginaw, and I've been asked to be in this role. So these folks, I'll just leave the sheet here for now rather than read you all their names, have a very important responsibility. You can see under that purpose section, they've helped articulate the models that I'll be presenting to you tonight, the 5 models in this process, and the planning assumptions and criteria we'll talk about shortly. They'll also make preliminary recommendations to you and final recommendations to the bishop about the configuration of parishes into the future, and recommendations about the implementation process to come. So they have a very significant role, but it's only as significant as your work is to give them your best thinking. One of the ways I think of a process like this is your most important responsibility is to give your best thinking, your hopes, your concerns, your thoughts. And I'll be describing in the next few minutes how you'll be asked to do that. But this is not a time to be bashful. It's a time to really say, what do you think ought to happen to make this part of the diocese as strong as possible? That thinking will then eventually go into your cohort conversation with neighboring parishes, and eventually will go to the planning commission. Your suggestions will, and then they'll give you a preliminary recommendation. You'll be able to critique that and respond to that as well. So let me kind of make that a little bit more specific. Having just talked about the goals and the planning commission, I want to now kind of almost jump ahead and move toward beginning with the end in mind. So if you look at the next tab, it's called Foundational Materials, and the first couple pages that are in yellow. Okay, you with me in the yellow pages? I don't mean the phone book yellow pages, but... So you can see at the top there it says Cohort Suggestion to the Planning Commission. So this is once you've completed your parish self-evaluation, which is going to be basically between now and March, then you'll be in cohorts, 2, 3, 4 other parishes that you'll be giving the first input into tonight, who they should be. And as then several parishes, you'll be looking at the criteria, you'll be looking at each parish's self-evaluation in the cohort. You'll also be drawing attention to something, maybe I'll mention for the first time now, that I think is it's the best I've seen, having worked in many, many different dioceses on this. Each of you, when you came in tonight, should have received what we call a data verification form for your parish. It would be in that big envelope. Okay, so what this provides you is the last 5 years of data in terms of Mass attendance, in terms of sacramental activity, baptisms, weddings, funerals. What's the activity? You're going to be asked to identify the trend lines. Is the trend going increasing, decreasing, staying the same? It's called data verification because, to the best of our knowledge, this is information that came from you to the diocese. They're giving it back to you to verify it. This year's Mass attendance, which you know, the Mass counts, you can fill in as we move along. But the next page is the financial data. So in a spirit of transparency, you're being given all the financial information that the diocese has. So the last 5 years of income and expenses, and if you have a school, is the school running at a surplus or at a deficit? What's your experience with the CSA assessment? Is there any debt? What kind of parish savings? All this information is given to you to study and to verify so that you're able to have the most accurate information the diocese has to do your work. So let me go back now to the form. With all that in the background, you're going to be asked in conversation with other parishes ultimately to make suggestions about the 5 models at the front, at the bottom of that page, the first page in section 2. And we'll talk about these models in just a moment. Do you see where it talks about linked parishes or partnership parishes, merged parishes, pastoral administrators, or in solidum teams? So we'll be talking about those in just a moment. And if you turn the page, you're going to be also asked to say why. Why do you think whatever model or models you choose is the best model? So in the spirit of beginning with the end in mind, you're going to have a chance to give your best thinking. And as it says up there on the screen, you're actually going to be asked to give that suggestion form, turn it in by May 18th, 2012. So some 6 months and a little bit more down the road, by May, that's going to happen. So briefly, tonight is what, November 30th. So December, January, February, early March, parish assessment, the parish focus. March, the next round of meetings will be March 21 or 22, when I'll meet with you again. That's when the cohort training will happen. So There's a whole other training on how to do cohort evaluation and what's asked of you. But by May, you'll be giving suggestions in. So you can see the training March 21, 22 there. The requirement at that time is you'll need to attend whichever night's training is close to you with your whole cohort present. You'll actually be sitting that night not at individual parish tables, but at cohort tables. Do I still have you with me? If not, I'm happy to answer a couple questions before we move on. I just saw a few fuzzy eyes along the room, and I don't want to lose you this early in the evening.